headquarters and the House of Justice. We thank everyone who had attended our King Day breakfast in Washington, D.C., and those that attended our New Jersey program. Chairman of our board is the Reverend Dr. W. Franklin Richardson. I'm Attorney Michael Hardy, and brothers and sisters, right now, I'd like to bring to you the president and founder of the National Action Network, the Reverend Dr. Al Sharpton. No justice, no justice, no justice, no justice. Happy King Day. Certainly, wait a minute now, I do the chant around here. It's too cold for me to put you out. I'm the chanter-in-chief here. We just left Washington, D.C. for our annual Martin Luther King breakfast, where former Vice President Joe Biden, former Mayor Bloomberg, Sherilyn Ifill of NAACP Legal Defense Fund spoke, and we just come back for our annual public policy forum. We'll hear from many of our officials here. But let me say this. I said this morning that it is an insult that the President of the United States and Vice President had no official recognition of Dr. King's birthday or this holiday on their schedule. A holiday that Ronald Reagan signed. After we attacked him, he went by a drive-by of the King Memorial, a 90-second stop, which is an epitome of an insult. Now, he didn't even tweet this morning, Happy King Day, until after we attacked him. We don't want a drive-by, Mr. President. We want government open, and in honor of Dr. King, you should address the government workers that he died fighting for sanitation workers in Memphis. If you really were sincere, you would talk to some of the workers that you have furloughed and delayed pay. Fact of the matter is, when you spoke to the whole country the other night, you didn't even speak to those workers. So the workers get no comment, no words from the president, and Dr. King gets a drive-by. This is the most insensitive president we've seen in our lifetime. Now let me let you know this. Martin Luther King III and Martin Luther King's wife, Martin Luther King III and his wife and his daughter were at our breakfast, as they are every year. You would think if the president had any kind of decency, he would have called Martin.
That's right.
2 years ago, he asked Martin to come to the Trump Towers and meet with him. Martin called me, I advised, and others did. Hear what he's got to say, but don't trust him. So 2 years ago, you met with Martin. This year, the reason why we know you didn't intend to do anything is Martin was in town, did my show from Washington last night. Never called Martin. But when somebody interrupted him and told him we were attacking him at the breakfast, he all of a sudden does this drive-by. And all of a sudden put out a proclamation. Let me tell you something. Martin Luther King holiday is not a day of talking about going shopping for King Day sales. Nor is it a day to go drive by a memorial. It's a day to deal with justice. It's a day to deal with world peace. It's a day to deal with workers' rights. There could be nothing more offensive to the legacy of Martin Luther King than to have 800,000 federal workers getting no pay and having having them furloughed, and their contractors and subcontractors and employees. You cannot drive by. I hope you know, Mr. Trump, that where you were driving was where Martin Luther King was going to build a resurrection city for the poor to be seen. But you wouldn't know that because you've never been on that side of the column. You thought you was driving by just his memorial. You were driving by the site he wanted to build a poor people's campaign village called Resurrection City. We never got the Resurrection City, but we will get the resurrection. We are not going to let you turn back the clock in this country. One of the reasons that I believe in that is we have people on the front line that have integrity and backbone. Let me tell you something, I'm from Brooklyn. And we fight different in Brooklyn than some folk do from the penthouses where Mr. Trump are. Sometimes we bob and weave, sometimes we come at you, you don't know what we gonna do. Because we've been taught to survive the fight. And I've got a person from Brooklyn that sometimes he looks over his glasses, sometimes he takes them off, but I know he's getting ready to hit the soft spot. And he's the one that leaned up on the couch and said, Mr. President, are you saying you'll own this shutdown? And in your penthouse arrogance, you say, yes, I own it. I said, knock out by the Brooklyn man, the minority leader of the United States Senate, the Brooklyn bomber, Senator Chuck Schumer.
My friend of 40 years, Reverend Sharpton. I want to thank all my colleagues here, and most of all, I want to thank you for coming here. We are showing people that the cold is not going to stop New Yorkers from finding justice, nor will it stop anybody in Washington from finding justice as well. Now, today's an amazing day. When you Dr. King, we need him and his memory and his inspiration more than ever, given what's happened in D.C. And think about this. This is the only day on the federal calendar that honors one man. We have President's Day for all the presidents. We have Memorial Day for those families who gave their lives. We have Veterans Day for the veterans. We have July 4th for the founding fathers in the country. But only one day for one man. And that is today, Dr. King Day. Why? By the way, I helped pass that law. So did the Rev in 1995. By the way, one of the congressmen with the worst of motivations had a one-word amendment he wanted. Take out the word king. Have Martin Luther Day. You know why he was doing that? It wasn't because he liked Martin Luther, even though he may have. But we passed it, and it's the only day. Now, why is he so amazing in so many ways? But here's the way I like to think about it one way. With his intellectual brilliance, his moral strength, and his spiritual leadership, his faith, on his big, broad, strong shoulders, Dr. King held up a giant mirror. And with his eloquence, he forced America to look into it. Those were the days of lynching. Those were the days of Jim Crow, North and South. Those were the days of so much. And the white establishment wanted to sweep it under the rug. Don't pay attention. But King, with his eloquence, forced America to look into that mirror, and what they saw they didn't like. And that began our path that still continues today. We've made progress, but we got a long way to go. And when this president was elected, it was a giant step back for all the things Dr. King believes in. I couldn't believe the night he was elected. Neither could my two daughters, so I taught them the old Shirelle song. Mama said there'd be days like this. There'd be days like this, my mama said. But even Mama couldn't realize what Trump would do. Within a few days, he's banning Muslims from coming into this country. We don't ban people because of their religion. A few days later, he set up this phony, short-lived voter commission. You know what that tried to do? Take away the voting rights that Dr. King died for and fought so hard to win. We were horrified when neo-Nazis, white supremacists, descended upon Charlottesville and Trump refused to condemn them. We were shocked by the foul, vile language President Trump used to insult countries that are the ancestral homes of more than 25, 30, 40 million Americans from Africa and the Caribbean. We were just amazed and appalled when he separated immigrant children, little babies, from their parents. And now we are aghast that he wants this giant 30-foot wall to be the symbol of America. I tell President Trump, I've told him to his face, we want the symbol of America to remain the Statue of Liberty, freedom, equality, not a divisive wall. And we will fight for that. Fight for that, we will.
Yes, we will.
Now, in conclusion, Dr. King inspires all of us. He inspires me. And people forget, he was not only one of the most brilliant leaders we've had, one of the most eloquent leaders we've had, one of the great faith leaders we've had. He was also a brilliant writer. He could sit down and just on the back of a piece of paper write words that were incredible. So he was brilliant. He was in so many ways. And he wrote what was probably the greatest letter an American has ever written. Ever. And that was, of course, the letter from the Birmingham jail. The letter from the Birmingham jail. You know the background. You know the background. He was resisting. They didn't call it that in those days, but that's what he was doing. And they put him in jail. A little cell, small, dark, dank. And then some of the white business leaders of Birmingham came into him and said, Dr. King, we know you're right, but slow down, wait. And he penned this letter. He penned this letter. And I'd like to just, I always do this every year, because I carry it with me and I read it not just on Dr. King Day, but all the time for inspiration. Why we cannot wait. Although you're going to wait, man. Why we cannot wait. Here's what he wrote. For years now, I have heard the word wait. It rings in the ears of every Negro with piercing familiarity. This wait has always meant never. We have waited more than 340 years for our constitutional and God-given rights. Perhaps it is easy for those who have never felt the stinging darts of segregation to say, wait, but when you have seen vicious mobs lynch your mothers and fathers at will, and drown your sisters and brothers at whim, when you have seen hate-filled policemen curse, kick, and even kill your black brothers and sisters, when you see the vast majority of your 20 million Negro brothers smothering in an airtight cage of poverty in the midst of an affluent society, when you find your tongue twisted and your speech stammering as you seek to explain to your 6-year-old daughter why she can't go to the public amusement park that has just been advertised on television, and see tears welling up in her eyes when she is told Funtown is closed to colored children, and see ominous clouds of inferiority beginning to form in her little mental sky, and see her beginning to distort her personality by developing an unconscious bitterness toward white people. When you have to concoct an answer for a 5-year-old son who is asking, Daddy, why do white people treat colored people so mean? When you take a cross-country drive and find it necessary to sleep night after night in the uncomfortable corners of your automobile because no motel will accept you. When your wife and mother are never given the respected title, Mrs. When you are harried by day and haunted by night, living constantly at tiptoe stance, never quite knowing what to expect next, and are plagued with inner fears and outer resentments, when you are forever fighting a degenerating sense of nobodiness, then you will understand why we find it difficult to wait. We cannot wait, we must not wait, we will not wait. Continue the fight and we will bring the America back that we know is the good America. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm with you all the way.
Give him a hand, Senator Chuck Schumer. Let me say, one of the reasons that we as an organization, which is built in the King tradition, our first chairman of the board was his executive director, Wyatt T. Walker.
That's right.
Mrs. King came to all of our conventions till she passed. Martin has been with us from the beginning. So we are the continuation of the King movement. That is why we don't have a lot of singing and humming on King Day. We want elected officials to speak on the record, like you just heard Chuck Schumer do, about what it is that we are facing or what they're going to do. I wanted to hear what I heard, that he's going to commit to fight Trump on this shutdown. You can't celebrate Dr. King and deal with a weak spine with this president. And too many people are going to be holding hands and singing "We Shall Overcome" today, honoring Dr. King, and never tell us what they are going to help us overcome with. I don't need you to catch my rhythm. I need you to catch my problem. They be just getting all pious and sanctimonious, singing "We Shall Overcome." Overcome what? Are we going to overcome the shutdown? Are we going to overcome the economic bias? Are we going to overcome what he's done to our criminal justice system? Overcome what? Don't give me words. And don't proclaim it Martin Luther King Day while you're undercutting the heirs of Martin Luther King. So we are now going to hear from the mayor of the city of New York. Now, you know, it's hard when I say mayor and see Dave Dinkins sitting up here. We love Bill, but in up these parts, we ain't got but one mayor. But we're going to hear from Dave Dinkins, but this mayor has certainly been here every year. He's been mayor, and 5 or 6 times in between. And every time we have called him, he's here. He feeds the hungry here. He stood with us when others ran. And a lot of folks are with you during sunshine, but he's with you during the rain in terms of the social justice issues we need to confront. It is my honor, therefore, to bring the mayor of the city of New York, Honorable Bill de Blasio.
Happy King Day, everybody. Happy King Day, everybody. It's a powerful day. This is a day it's good we're together, because we have things to remember, things to think about, and lots of things to do. Now, when it comes to doing things, when it comes to action, where else would you go but the National Action Network? And I want to say about Rev, when you listen to him talk about his youth, talk about the impact that Dr. King and his movement had on the thinking of the young Al Sharpton, the Poor People's Campaign, the efforts to organize people, not just for the racial justice they so richly deserve, for the civil rights they so richly deserve, but for the economic justice they needed as well. That is what Dr. King told us, and that's what Al Sharpton took up from literally the time he was a young child. Let's thank Rev for always staying true to Dr. King's values and methods. And I want to thank all the leaders who are here, all the activists who are here, all the elected officials who are here, and 2 deans of this movement, 2 people who have lit the way for us for decades and decades. Of course, Mayor David Dinkins, thank you for all you have done. And a woman who brings energy and fight every single time, whatever she is having for breakfast, I want to have too. Hazel Dukes, thank you. So, I want to pick up on a point that Rev made. It's very powerful. The folks who invoke Dr. King but don't believe in what Dr. King believed in. The way this holiday gets celebrated too often, I would call it the sanitized version, the simplified version, the desiccated version. It's not the whole Dr. King that a lot of times is remembered. Because when you think of his most famous speech, which is absolutely beautiful, it speaks about unity and it speaks about equality, and we need those things. But Dr. King spoke about a struggle for justice. And not just racial justice, as I said. He believed you couldn't have racial justice without economic justice. He believed the status quo was broken. And that people were being they had their hopes withheld, their possibilities withheld because of institutional racism. And that racism did not just deny civil rights. It took away economic possibility. It took away the chance for people to live a decent life. That's what he spoke about. Now, Dr. King, in 1967, he spoke to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. He literally called for a complete overhaul of the United States economy. He talked about the need for redistribution. He talked about the fact that power and wealth were concentrated in very, very few hands. That was 1967. Dr. King, although he would be proud of us for some of the advances we have made as a society in some areas, if he looked at the question of where all the wealth and power is, he would say today it's concentrated in even fewer hands than it was then. And that his vision has not been realized. Listen to what he said that day in 1967, quote, "Let us be dissatisfied until the tragic walls that separate the outer city of wealth and comfort, those outer walls that separate the outer city of wealth and comfort from the inner city of poverty and despair, shall be crushed by the battering rams of the forces of justice." Couldn't be clearer. If we do not have opportunity, if we do not have a chance of living a decent life, if we cannot feed our families, if we cannot make ends meet, what kind of rights do we have? So that's what he saw way back then. Now, today in this city, in this country, people are working harder and harder. They're literally working longer and longer hours. They're getting less and less for it. They are working longer and longer hours. That means they have less and less time with their own families. Less and less time for themselves. Is that the society Dr. King would have wished for us?
No.
He wished for us something better.
Yes, he did.
So here in this city, we are going to lead the way. We're going to show it can be done. We're going to show that working people will get the wages they deserve, the benefits they deserve, the life they deserve. And one thing we're going to do in New York City, and we're going to show the nation it can be done, we're guaranteeing health care for every New Yorker. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're young or old. I don't care if you're a citizen or undocumented. You need health care. And if you look at our faith traditions, it doesn't say you get health because you're a citizen, but you don't because you aren't. That's not how the Bible teaches us. Everyone deserves the right to health care. From this point on, every New Yorker gets a health care card. If they don't have insurance, they get a simple health care card. They get a primary care doctor. They get a specialist when they need it. They actually get to go to the doctor, not just the emergency room. And one other thing I want to mention we're doing in this city to try to live in the image of Dr. King in today's world. We're saying that all those people work so hard heart, who get so little back. There are almost 500,000 New Yorkers who don't get a single day off that's paid. They don't get a single paid vacation day. They don't get a single day for themselves and their family. We're going to pass a law that says every New Yorker has a right to 2 weeks of paid time off, paid personal time every single year. If we can't do that, what kind of society are we? We are not here just to work and work and work and never get a chance to live life. That's not what Dr. King wished for us. And I'll say one more thing. The changes that we will continue to make right here. You know, for a long time, the status quo in this society tried to shunt aside so many people because of color, because of class. Tried to say, if you lived in a certain place, there's something lesser about you. We know for decades and decades, our brothers and sisters who lived in public housing did not get their fair share. We know they were ignored. It was supposed to be public housing to respect people and help them on their way forward. Instead, it became treated as a negative stereotype. That people needed a little bit of help and that was treated like there was something wrong with them, but there was never anything wrong with them. The people who live in public housing today are the backbone of New York City. They are the people who make New York City work. We hear their voices, we see them, and we want to serve them, and I'm here to announce something. There's actually some good news on this King Day. Over the last 5 years, we have worked to make sure that residents of NYCHA get good jobs. And the efforts are paying off. The training and the placement and the preparation and connecting them to the work they deserve. And I can report that we now have placed 15,000 New York City public housing residents in good jobs so they can have a better life. And we are going to do more. We're going to remind our brothers and sisters in the labor movement. And Dr. King loved the labor movement, but he wanted the labor movement to treat everyone equally and open up opportunity for everyone. So we are going to push labor a little bit more. And we're going to push for the kinds of apprenticeships that will uplift the residents of NYCHA. And we're going to open up more opportunity. We're going to open the doors of Amazon in Queens for people who live in public housing. We're going to open the doors in Brownsville, Brooklyn. Wherever there is opportunity, I want to see public housing residents benefit. That's what we aim to do in this city. Brothers and sisters, Dr. King did not want us to just give speeches. He would never have wanted his day celebrated just with words. He would have loved the National Action Network because it's all about uplifting the next person, and the next person, and the next person. Let us commit ourselves to that, and we will live in the image of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Thank you, and God bless you all.
We have many officials, and we're going to hear from them. Let me first, though, thank our staff here. Give a hand to Attorney Michael Hardy. Brother Derek Perkinson, who's now coordinating in our field here in New York, and well as Isabel Moskin, as well as Brandon Hicks, who helped organize Reverend Kevin McCall and Sister Katrina Jefferson, and the young man that grew up learning this, Minister Stephen Marshall. Give all of them a big hand. One of the things that is different about NAN, some of you become activists once a year on King Day. And others, when there is something happening, then you run out, get mad, come to 2 rallies, and we don't see you no more till the next happening. And at those 2 you yell, we ain't gonna take it no more. And I ain't seen you since the last one you wasn't gonna take. But there's some folk that are here all the time, every day, every Saturday morning, because Dr. King said you have to have a sustained struggle. And in the absence of that, they will work to try and turn back the clock on voting rights, on economic rights, on criminal justice, including police reform, all of these things. That's why we've got to, on King Day, crystallize what that's about. One of the things that I'm so thankful for is that when we had the midterm elections last year, we were able to bring in not only new blood, but progressive older blood into positions of power that can now counter what this president is doing. Many of you need to understand that there's been a progressive person on the battlefield in this city a long time who is now the chair of the House Judiciary Committee. And if Donald Trump, after he eats his midnight Big Mac, has a nightmare, this man is in that nightmare. I don't know what he's gonna do. He ain't talked to me about it, but I know him a long time, and I know he will do what is fair, and he's not afraid. As my mama was out from Alabama, she'd say he ain't scared. And I want to bring him, he's here every year, he's our friend and our congressman on the west side, and the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Congressman Jerry Nadler.
Thank you very much, Reverend. Happy Martin Luther King Day, everybody. Let me say that Dr. King, people sometimes, they remember civil rights struggle. They remember the voting rights struggle. But why was Dr. King in Memphis when he was assassinated? He was there to support sanitation workers in a strike. He was there to support the right of collective bargaining of municipal workers, to be able to get a better standard of living, to be able to hold their heads up high, speak collectively, and organize. And that is a right. In fact, everything that the Reverend King fought for is still under attack. That is very much under attack. The right to organize, the right to have unions, the right to speak truth to power, that's always under attack. And we will support and reverse the attacks on the unions, the attacks on the rights of working people to have a voice and to have a better share of this society. We will reverse a lot of what's going on. One of the things that Dr. King would certainly oppose today, he didn't live to see it, he would have been very upset by it, is the mass incarceration we have in this country. We had something like 700,000 people in jail in 1980 in the country, and now we have like 3.5 million. And that's because of the war on drugs, which was largely a racist-inspired war. And we have to reverse it. We have to get these people out of jail. We have to restore their voting rights, which is something that was taken away. And we made a small start toward that in the last session of Congress, a very small start, but we will increase that. We have to have sentencing reform, we have to have retroactive sentencing reform, and criminal justice reform of all types. And we will start it. And let me say, we have a progressive, decent majority on the Judiciary Committee and in the House of Representatives today for the first time in a long time. We do not have a progressive, decent majority in the United States Senate, or certainly in the White House. So a lot of what we will do this year, some of which we have a shot at passing, much of which we will tee up. If you study the history of decent progressive legislation, whether it's economic legislation, or Social Security, or Medicare, or Medicaid, or voting rights, or civil rights, whatever it is, you see it comes in spurts. And it comes in spurts whenever you assemble the majority in Congress and the White House at the same time, and you have done the spade work to tee it up so that when you have that opportunity, which may only last 2 years, you can ram it through. So a lot of what we're going to be doing this year is to tee that up. We are going to hold, because the Supreme Court says we have to if we want to do this, we're going to hold 10 public hearings, some in field hearings in different places around the country, to develop the case for overturning the Supreme Court decision in a way that they allowed us to do on the Voting Rights Act. To restore the pre-clearance, to restore the requirements so that local jurisdictions, local states and counties and towns and cities cannot effectively shut down the right to vote for minorities, for blacks, Hispanics, whoever. We are going to do that. We are going to pass legislation to hold the president accountable in many different ways. We must hold him accountable. This won't be done only through legislation, believe me. There'll be a lot of other ways. And we are going to confront, in very real ways, what is perhaps one of the most unfortunate illustrations of straight racial prejudice that we see now, which is the president, who is clearly racist in many of his motivations. But we are going to confront him and change a lot of what he's doing in immigration. Why in immigration? Because immigration is always an issue in American history. But right now it's an issue because the president doesn't want the wrong immigrants. That's what it's all about. He wants immigrants from places like Norway. Norway's a very nice place. So nice that they don't tend to send as many immigrants. He doesn't want immigrants from what he calls S blank T whole countries, which means black and brown countries. That's what this immigration fight is really all about. It's racism, pure and simple. And because of this racism, he is willing to split families at the border. He's willing to take kids away from their children. He's willing to have government-sponsored kidnapping. That's what it amounts to. We still have hundreds of kids separated from their parents. We are going to confront him on that. We are confronting him now. And let me say one thing about that. If you look at Scripture, the most often repeated commandment in Scripture, about 35 to 40 times it says, "Thou shalt not oppress the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt." So what are we doing? We are systematically oppressing the stranger. That will not stand. We cannot permit this. We cannot permit this rogue president to impose a racist regime on this country, whether it's been immigration or voting rights or economics or anything else. And now that we have some levers of power, we will reverse some of this. We will fight it. We will tee it up for the next election. And we will redeem the honor of our country. And we'll carry on the fight of Martin Luther King Jr. Thank you very much.
Congressman Jerry Nadler, let me tell you the significance of what he just said on the voting rights part. When they had Section 5, you could not change the voting in Georgia that the Secretary of State did to Stacey Abrams if they had to pre-clear it. By them taking out Section 5, they could make those changes with no pre-clearance. It is absolutely important they do what he just said, and we must support it. Yeah. And I think that a lot of us do not understand this is what the battle's all about. They have taken the heart out of Section 5. Let me bring on now someone. Several years ago, I got a call from Governor David Paterson. Governor Paterson said to me that he was in the middle of deliberating who would be the one to fill the empty seat for U.S. Senate for the state of New York that the governor would appoint since Mrs. Clinton was going on to Secretary of State. And he said to me, "I want you to take a call from Caroline Kennedy." And I did. I took Caroline to Sylvia's. We had a big lunch. A lot of press covered us sitting up in the window where Obama and I sat. And I thought she was going to be the next senator. Well, he called me that Wednesday, Mayor Dinkins, and said, have you ever heard of Congresswoman Kirsten Gillibrand? Yes. I said, no, who is that? He said, she's from northern New York, and you'll know her by the weekend. And I said, why will I know her by the weekend? He said, because I would love for you to have her speak for you Saturday morning. I said, well, why would I have her speak? He said, you'll understand it. That Thursday, he announced the new senator from New York was going to be Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. So that Saturday, she made her first appearance on this stage in front of you. She said that I want you to know that I'm accessible and I'm going to start my Senate career in the House of Justice. I couldn't even say her name right. I called her Gillibrand. Then she said, and we live on WLIB, and she said, all right, I'll take your questions. And I said, no, we do a rally note. She said, and she stood there and dealt with people. That's how we started. Now the whole world knows her. And she's been re-elected. She got more votes than everybody on the state ticket did last year. They asked me in Washington this morning at our NAM breakfast with Biden and them. They said, well, your senator is running for president. What do you think? I said, one thing I've learned is don't underestimate her. Because nobody knew her name. And now everybody knows her name. And she started at the House of Justice, and she's here, as she is every year, at the House of Justice, the junior senator and senior candidate for president, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand.
Tell you how excited I am to be here at the House of Justice on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day. It is such an important day for us to be here. It's also no better place to talk about justice with an extraordinary leader, with Dr. Reverend. He is somebody who literally has been at the face of social justice for decades, the face of leadership and advocacy that has changed the face of this country. So thank you for your leadership, and thank you for your passion. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. continues to inspire us every single day because he believed in a set of values that transcends time and movements. He believed in right versus wrong.
Yes, he did.
He knew that only light can drive out darkness. And that we are all called to fight for others. He said an injustice against one of us is an injustice against all of us. And as a person of deep faith who has been called to public service, I look at Dr. King for inspiration because his call to action was personal. As we celebrate his life and his vision, I believe his message is as alive and as relevant as it has ever been. Dr. King's life should push us all to think about one question. What am I doing with my time here on earth to serve others? Because Dr. King taught us that the greatest purpose of life is serving others. He said the time is always right to do what's right. He taught us the power of love over hate. He asked us to be the light of the world and the salt of the earth to help others. And I'm going to run for President of the United States because as a person this. And that's why I believe that healthcare should be a right and not a privilege. It's why I believe we should have better public schools for everyone, no matter what block you grow up on. It's why I believe we should start rewarding work again in this country. Because anybody who wants to work hard should be able to earn their way into the middle class. That is what the American dream has always been in this country. But to get any of this done, we need to take on the systems of power that make this so difficult. We have to take them head on. We have to take on institutional racism. We have to take on corporate greed. We have to take on the corrupt special interests that decide everything. And we have to have an honest conversation about systemic, institutional, and daily individual acts of racism in our country that hold people and families back for generations. We also have to recognize that there are so many layers of bias in this country. Women of color face even greater challenges because of the intersectionality of racism and sexism. That fact is just compounded by the lack of real opportunity to compete on the same playing field. Fighting against this will take all of us. It cannot be left to people of color alone. It is wrong to ask men and women of color to bear these burdens every single day, the same fights over and over again. White women like me must bear part of this burden and commit to amplifying your voices. We have to join you on the battlefield for justice for all. The fact that in New York City today, if you are a black woman, you are 12 times more likely to die in childbirth because of institutional racism in our healthcare system. The fact that a black or brown man is 10 times more likely to get arrested for marijuana possession than a white man is outrageous, and it is all of our responsibility to change it. The fact that black men and black women cannot earn $1 on the dollar for the same work as a white man is unacceptable, and this has to be all of our fight. The fact that state after state, there are forces that are trying to deny the right to vote to black Americans is an outrage, and it has to be all of our responsibilities. Because if I really do care about your family as much as I care about my own, it is my fight. It has to be my fight. I'm reminded of Matthew 5. Matthew 5 says, "You are the light of the world." And it commands all of us to let your light shine before others. What that means is we are supposed to do what's right and fight for others and let that shine. It also says you are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, it is no longer good for anything. Salt preserves what is good. We, the people, are the salt of this country, and we must preserve our democracy. It will only work when we, the people, stand up and fight for it. There is so much more work to be done. Shine your light in those darkest of places. Preserve what is right and what is best in our communities. We must keep taking on the insurance companies if we want health care as a right and not a privilege. We must keep taking on the drug companies if we want lower prescription drug prices. We must keep taking on the corporate greed and the corruption of the special interests in Washington who write legislation in the dead of night. We must restore that power to you, the people, by getting the money out of politics. And I know that we have the compassion, the courage, the fearless determination that it will take to get this done. And I know this because of all the shoulders on whom we stand, the people who have come before us, who have done brave things, who have died to make a difference for this country. We stand on the shoulders of generations of Americans, fighters who believed that we need a more perfect union. So we fought. We fought to abolish slavery. We fought for women's suffrage. We fought for civil rights. We fought for workers' rights, union rights, LGBTQ equality. We take the torch the next mile. And it is a torch. It is a beacon of light and hope. She stands in Newark Harbor. She calls to all those who need our help and promises to protect them. Those are the fights of this country. Each generation has chosen to make this country a more perfect union for a reason. And the reason is that is who we are as Americans, despite our flaws. We want to bring people together. We want to help one another. Until now. Until this person in the White House. Until our president has chosen to tear this country apart on every line, every division, every racial line, every religious line. He chooses to divide us community by community. He has inspired a hate and a darkness in this country that I have never witnessed myself. He is tearing apart the very fabric of who we are as a nation, our very common decency. And that is what we are being called to fight against. That lack of compassion did not start with President Trump, but he has exacerbated it. He has added fuel to a very ugly fire. So we need to remember the golden rule. We need to remember what we truly believe in, that we should love our neighbor as ourselves. We should be doing unto others as we want them to do unto us. So how do we fight? How do we fight this battle? And Reverend, you will remember this and you know this. We look at Ephesians 6, verse 10. If we want the strength of our faith's mighty powers, we have to put on the full armor of God. Amen. Only when you put on the full armor of God will you be able to take on the authorities, the rulers of this dark world. We will wear the belt of truth because we know the truth. We speak truth to power. We will put on the breastplate of righteousness because we know right from wrong and we will not forget it. We will hold that shield of faith. As Dr. King said, faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the whole staircase. So hold on to that faith tightly. We will wield the sword of the Spirit. The sword of the Spirit is the Word of God, and the good book promises us the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. I think this is a moment for all of us. For all of us to listen to our hearts, to hear that call, to do what is right, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Only what's right can defeat what is wrong. And I feel very called at this moment to do what is right and to fight. Please join me.
Well, you have a contrast. You have one president that when they asked what his favorite scripture was, he said the whole Bible. And you have a candidate that can quote the Bible people. I don't know whether the president knows where Ephesians is. Give a hand, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. Let us hear now from the Congresswoman from the East Side, who's also going to be a chairwoman, Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney.
Thank you so much to you and to Reverend Al Sharpton, America's Reverend, for calling us here today and to celebrate Dr. King. And I just want to remember that the first resolution that ever passed in a city council calling for the creation of Dr. Martin Luther King Day was put into the city council under what mayor? David Dinkins. And that passed, so we want to thank America's mayor, Harlem's mayor, for his leadership in so many ways and for all the help that Hazel Dukes has always given for civil rights and human rights. I want to thank all of you for being part of the Blue Wave that elected a Democratic Congress, and that is going to make a difference not only to your life but to America. We're going to build that 2nd Avenue subway all the way up to Harlem with the jobs and the convenience and the modern access to improve your quality of life. And we've already, you should applaud for that. That's with the help of Grace Ming and Congresswoman Clark and Espaillat, that is really going to happen with the Democratic Congress. And we've already passed 7 bills to open up the government. We had the votes to make that happen. They went to the Senate, and with the Republican Senate, it hasn't passed. We've introduced bills to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. That's going to help people and workers. And we're introducing legislation to finally ratify the Equal Rights Amendment, so women's rights are protected in the Constitution against sexual violence and assault. And right now I was told that McConnell is going to now come out and say that he'll pass and reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act. Well, our rights should not be held hostage for other bills. Our rights should be in the Constitution. And with the Democratic Congress, we hope to make that happen. Now, when I was a little girl, I used to have these conversations with my mother. And we would argue over who the greatest American was. And she would always argue it was FDR, and who had pulled us through the Depression and helped with the economy. And I would always argue that it was Dr. Martin Luther King, because he, more than anyone in my lifetime, changed this country. And when you look at it, he wasn't a congressperson or a senator or a president of a country. He wasn't the head of some big company. It was the power of his faith. It was the power of his words to inspire, to bring people together, and to literally change this country. This country changed. Doors were opened, opportunities were more because of Dr. King. This past summer I went to Memphis just to see where he was when he died. And every year I read through his speeches. And we have to remember that when he was killed, he was fighting for workers. He was marching with labor. He was with sanitation workers, telling them they had the rights for better wages and for a better life. And he did this all across this country. Now, I must say that I respect the Reverend because of his stance too. He speaks out against a lot of powers. He speaks for what's right. Not just on Dr. King's birthday, but every year we have a pilgrimage in Congress where we go back to Selma, Alabama, Birmingham, Alabama, led by the great John Lewis, who was one of the great supporters of Reverend King. And we relive that whole episode. And he is always there. Our Reverend Sharpton is always there too. Now, I will be chairing the Joint Economic Committee in this Congress, and we do reports on where the economy is with the Senate. And our first report is going to be with the CBC, the Congressional Black Caucus, and it's going to be we've gained a lot of social justice. We elected a great president. We've had a lot of success, but we still have to work on economic justice. And the report is going to be with Karen Bass, who's the head of the CBC, and I hope Reverend Al will join us, pointing out what we need to do economically to help people that need more help in our country. So I'm thrilled to be here, to be inspired by you. Thank you for allowing me to be part of this great celebration for a great leader. We celebrate Dr. King today, not because of who he was, but because he taught us something about who we can be. Thanks to Dr. King, we know we are not through changing, and we are not through dreaming. Thank you, Dr. King. Thank you, all my leaders.
Let us hear now from a young man who proudly tells everyone he's a member of National Action Network. He has rose to national prominence, but never has left his grounding. You know, we get some people that the higher they get, the more we find they disappear. And then there are some that understand that you can't be a giant unless your feet is on the ground. And many of us are looking up to folk that are standing on ladders, that if you kick the ladder, they would be shorter than you. Giants stand on the ground and reach new heights. And he's grown to be a giant, but he's grounded, and he is now the head of the Democratic caucus in the U.S. Congress. He is a civil rights attorney extraordinaire. He is a member of National Action Network. I checked his dues. The congressman from Brooklyn, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries.
No justice? No justice? No justice? It's an honor and a blessing to once again be here at the House of Justice, of course, with the Reverend Dr. Al Sharpton. We're so thankful for him and all that he has done, all that he represents. You know, of course, James Brown was like a father figure to Reverend Sharpton, and James Brown was often referred to as the hardest working man in show business. I'm thankful that Reverend Sharpton is the hardest working man in the people's business. Who continues to fight hard. He's a voice for the voiceless, a defender of the disenfranchised, a powerful, profound, prophetic, principled preacher. And New York City is a better place today. The nation is a better place today because of Al Sharpton. He used to rock sweatsuits, now he rocks business suits, but the uniform may have changed. His commitment to justice remains the same. And so we're thankful for Reverend Sharpton, of course, to Charlie Rangel, the Lion of Lenox Avenue, and David Dinkins and Hazel Dukes. We stand on their shoulders. And they have helped to mentor and provide advice and guidance to all of the younger elected officials who you see behind the stage right now, to all of my colleagues in government from the United States Congress who work so hard on your behalf down in Washington, D.C. I'm thankful for them as well. I won't stand before you long. There's a whole bunch of folks. I'm going to try to follow what's often referred to as the B rule of public speaking. The B rule of public speaking: be brief, be bright, and be gone. Well, let me just simply say, these are challenging times in the United States of America. We have a hater in the White House. A birther-in-chief, the Grand Wizard of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. One of the things that we've learned is that while Jim Crow may be dead, he's still got some nieces and nephews that are alive as well. So one of the things that we need to do is learn from the lessons of Dr. King and how he dealt with such hate in the 50s and 60s. In 1963, I think it was the governor of Alabama who rose in his inauguration speech and said, segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. And that was Governor George Wallace. But Dr. King showed us in that very same year that when haters rise up, you don't run from the problem, you run toward the problem. And so shortly after that, Dr. King announced that he was going to desegregate Birmingham. He announced that even in the aftermath of that segregationist speech that Wallace said, Dr. King went to Birmingham even though he knew there were billy clubs in Birmingham, bloodthirsty dogs in Birmingham. There was Bull Connor in Birmingham, but you don't run from the problem, you run toward the problem. And that's the lesson that Dr. King teaches us all today as we confront the drama that we're dealing with in Washington right now. I don't want to go into all of that shutdown talk, but I want to make it clear we are not going to give Donald Trump one dime for a medieval border wall. That's a 5th century solution to a 21st century problem. If Donald Trump wants to build a wall, let him do it around 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue so we don't have to be reminded of the long national nightmare that is the Trump presidency. Challenging times that we're dealing with, but as I get ready to take my seat, my grandmother used to tell me that life is filled with ups and downs, with highs and lows, with peaks and with valleys. You know, one of the reasons why I think so many folks don't like to fly is because they recognize that at some point along the way, you're likely to encounter turbulence. Y'all know what I'm talking about? Up in the air, 30,000 feet high, plane starts rocking back and forth, no place to go. At that moment, everybody on the plane gets religion. Lord, just plant my feet on solid ground. What am I trying to say? You can't get from your point of departure to your point of destination without at some moment along the way encountering turbulence. So Dr. King encountered turbulence, but he overcame it, and now we're being challenged to encounter a turbulent moment in our democracy. But we believe, as Reverend Sharpton teaches us, that this is a country with liberty and justice for all. We have to fight for it. This should be a country with equal protection under the law. We have to fight for it. This is a country of government of the people, by the people, and for the people, but we have to fight for it. A turbulent moment for our democracy. Let me end with this thought. There's some young folks who were gathered at the home of one of the wealthiest people in the world. And they gathered at that home, and at that home there was a lake. They were on one side of the lake. And in the lake there were crocodiles, alligators, one small turtle. These young folks were gathered at the lake, and all of a sudden the owner of the estate showed up and saw these young folks and said, if any of you are willing to jump in this lake, rescue the turtle, and make it to the other side, I'll give you anything that you want in this world. About 5 minutes passed by, nobody responded. So the owner of the estate turned around and began to walk away. And as he's walking away, all of a sudden he heard a big splash, turned back around, saw one young person in the lake frantically trying to make it to the other side. This young person dodged some crocodiles, dodged the alligators, made it to the middle, scooped up the turtle, bobbed and weaved, made it to the other side, got out, dried off, handed over the turtle to the owner of the estate, who said, congratulations. I'm not sure how you did it, Rev, but you made it to the other side. Now, as I promised, you can have anything that you want in this world. And the young person paused for a moment and said, well, I just want to know who pushed me in the lake. I'm about to get out of your way, but sometimes in life, you find yourself in the midst of unexpected adversity. That's what happened in 2016. We found ourselves in a turbulent moment, unexpected adversity for our democracy. But as Reverend Sharpton teaches us, as Dr. King taught us, as Harriet Tubman taught us, whenever you find yourself in a moment of unexpected adversity, you've only got two options. You can either sink or you can swim. And the great thing about the African American
American journey, and never we found ourselves in a moment of unexpected adversity, we've always made it to the other side. God bless you. God bless you. God bless you. We shall overcome.
Hakeem! 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 Certainly, you know, we have now nationwide in man about 112 chapters, and I'm going to tour 99 of them with that turtle thing, Hakeem. I'm gonna wait till I get out of town so nobody know I got it from you. But that turtle's going on national tour, I promise you. Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm ran in 1972. The President of the United States. I was one of her youth coordinators, and one of the big challenges that we had was that every time she stopped to campaign at a corner, Ada Smith, who was one of her aides, later became state senator, Victor Robles, who later became city clerk, and me would all be ducking because we didn't want to have to hold her pocketbook while she spoke. And whoever wasn't quick ended up having to hold Mrs. C's pocketbook. Well, there's another fiery woman who stands strong and tall in Brooklyn. And she is our sister, our gladiator, our friend. And I'm gonna bring her now, and I'm not gonna hold her pocketbook. Congresswoman Yvette Clarke.
To the Reverend Al Sharpton and the members of the National Action Network. To all of my colleagues here gathered, we've got some powerful leadership behind us, y'all. I'm particularly proud of the congressional delegation and the fact that there's a brother from Brooklyn. There's a brother from Brooklyn who's number 5 in the leadership of the Democratic caucus in Washington, D.C. I'm also proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with my sister, the Honorable Grace Meng of Queens, Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney, who you heard from earlier, because we are part of the 131. 131 women who now sit in the hall. And on January 3rd, the cavalry finally arrived. You see, not did 131 women show up, but we then decided we would elevate Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House of Representatives. Y'all need to clap louder than that. Y'all don't understand what Nancy Pelosi about to do now. And then we started organizing ourselves because we knew that this moment is a moment for courage. We knew that in the spirit of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and all of those foot soldiers who made it possible for us to sit in the most diverse House of Representatives in the history of the United States. That this is a transformative moment. And so I came here today, Reverend, thank you so much for the invitation, and Ann, to say that we can't get caught up. We have got to stay focused. There is a reality TV star trying to drag us into an episode. But we need to let him know that we didn't get here where we are by episode. We are part of an epic. We are part of a legacy of people who knew liberation had to be a part of our agenda. Wherever we find ourselves oppressed, wherever we find ourselves imprisoned, wherever we find ourselves marginalized, we continue to move forward. We continue to fight back. We continue to raise hell in every single way we can possible. It is critical at this time that we remain focused, because when this episode is over, we need to ask ourselves, where will we be? There are a whole lot of folk out there who now all of a sudden the eyes are open to our plight. When this has been an ongoing saga. We need to recognize that democracy is not a spectator sport. It is not a noun, it is a verb. And if we don't move right now, what will we say to our children and our grandchildren when they ask us, what did we do when they elected 45? We will be able to look them in the eye, and we will be able to say to them with all assurity that we stood up, we spoke out, we mobilized, we organized. We went out and we voted in record numbers, and we put the people in place that made it possible for you to get the college education you're getting today. For you to live in a housing with dignity and hold your head high. Where you will be a part and are a part of a civil society that recognizes your character, that recognizes your brilliance, your talent, your skill, and your expertise. Because when Donald Trump challenged us, we knew that we were witnessing spiritual wickedness in high places. And we put on the full armor. We got into the battle, and we were victorious. So to each and every one today, this is not a time for the faint of heart. Back in Brooklyn, we say, if you're gonna be a punk, stand to the side. This is the time for I heard some uptown folks say y'all learned that from us. I'm not trying to get into that. I'm not trying to get into that. Because our unity. Hello, somebody. All right, simmer down, simmer down. Brooklyn is in the house. Will you let them know I came? Brooklyn is always in the house. We want to make sure that over the next couple weeks, when they try to divide us, when they try to put so much on us, so much suffering, so much pain, that we remember the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We remember the ultimate sacrifice for our liberation. We remember John Lewis at the Edmund Pettus Bridge. We remember all of those who could not go any further but gave their lives to make sure that we would stand up in this time, at this moment, get to our rightful place. And when it's over, we will be shouting hallelujah, because we will have done a great thing. God bless you.
See, y'all have heard both of our U.S. senators, and both of them quoted scripture. The mayor quoted scripture. Jeffries, Gillibrand, everybody done spoke. There's something about up here where I speak that I get a little, I put a little woo-woo on them. They can't help it. I want to go to one of our major labor leaders, but before we go away from our federal representatives. We've heard from Congressman Natalie and Jeffries and Yvette Clarke. One of my favorite songs was and is Amazing Grace. And in Queens politics, it took a new meaning after the last election. May I introduce to you the Congresswoman from Queens, Amazing Grace Mann.
Good afternoon. I'm from Queens and I will not compete with my brothers and sisters from Brooklyn or the Bronx, but I got friends in high places. I am humbled to stand here before all of you today and honor the memory of Dr. King. A few years ago, I traveled to Atlanta with my family and took my 2 young boys, Tyler and Brandon, to visit the birth home of Dr. King. At a time when our country is becoming more divided every week by every tweet, I want my boys to know our history, our American history. I want them to understand that when we fight against injustice, we stand on the shoulders of men and women like Dr. King, who gave his life to fight for equality and justice. I want my boys to learn one of Dr. King's most enduring lessons, that each and every one of us is empowered to affect and make change. Yes. I wish that I didn't have to teach them these lessons at such a young age. I wish that people in my own neighborhood didn't sometimes yell racial slurs at my boys when they walk down the street. I wish that moms and dads of young men in this country don't have to give their sons an extra warning when they leave the house just because of the color of their skin. I wish that my boys didn't know what it's like to face hate. Dr. King said, the time is always right to do what is right. And these times are certainly no exception. It's not enough for us to just focus on the next presidential election or to pin our hopes on a different administration or presidential candidate. But we must do what we can to affect change today and every single day. I choose to focus on making sure that every one of our voices is heard, especially the most vulnerable amongst us. And to me, that means removing systemic barriers to voting, which disproportionately affects minority communities, the elderly, and the disabled. I firmly believe that people should be allowed to have their voice heard by their elected leaders in the most persuasive way that they can be heard, with their vote. If there was ever any need for proof, we only have to look to the most recent elections in Dodge City, Kansas, or in Georgia, to see why we need to expand and protect our voting rights. And I saw these inequities firsthand when I went to Georgia, like so many of you, to campaign for Stacey Abrams. The civil rights movement showed us that when we come together and leverage our collective power, we can accomplish big things and make systemic change. Who are my people? Who do I turn to when I want partners? When I, as an Asian American, first got into politics, I know, and I continue to know, that I have benefited from the compass of leadership of African American leaders and the community. When I first ran for office against a Democratic establishment, many people didn't think I was a viable candidate, and they wouldn't help me. But my mentors, Black women and leaders in the community, pushed me forward. When there are instances of unfairness and discrimination in our community, we often wonder and look towards people like Reverend Al Sharpton and see what would Reverend Sharpton do. When I first got to Albany, I was a bit of an outsider at the time. I was the only Asian American legislator, so I couldn't join a caucus. I didn't have a caucus to join. But it was the Black Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian caucus that invited me in and showed me just how powerful we can be when we work together. In Congress, in Washington, D.C., the number of members of the Congressional Black, Hispanic, and Asian Caucus are a majority of the Democratic caucus in Washington. This past election, for the very first time, our three caucuses joined forces and helped endorse and push forward the various candidates endorsed by our caucuses. And because of that, today, as Yvette Clarke said, we are larger, stronger, and a more diverse body than ever before. So together, on Dr. King's Day, I ask that you join me in reaffirming our commitment to protect the vulnerable, do good for others, and fight against bigotry and injustice every day, wherever and whenever we see it. Thank you for all that you do.
Congresswoman Lee, now one of the outstanding labor leaders of our country, a man that heads the United Federation of Teachers in New York. He stood with us on many battles. I've called him when I know that there have been times that segments of his membership would say, why are you out there marching on this? But he's guided by conscience and guided by what he feels is right. And it's no accident he's standing there near the mother of Eric Garner, Gwen Carr. Both live in Staten Island and both have addressed even the issues of justice. He said that he couldn't come today because of a family emergency, but then said, I'm gonna run by because the labor movement was as important to Dr. King as any movement. And I want us to welcome our friend, the president of the UFT, Michael Mogul.
Thank the Reverend for inviting me here today. And it is my pleasure and honor to be here. When I was a teacher in Brooklyn, I'm an English teacher. And my children would say, we would discuss different holidays. And when it came to this holiday, I would say, this is the day every year you should recommit. Recommit to standing up and doing right. To standing up for things that we know others will feel uncomfortable doing. So I'm not going to stand here in front of you today and talk about the twisted soul in the White House. Because we have much more work to do. We will get past him. We will get past him. And I will not talk about the wonderful Secretary of Education who believes that there should be billions of dollars cut out of education because poverty does not matter in a children's life. I will not be here to speak about her. But what I am here to speak about is what we are all committed to doing. And look at what we are facing today. As my good friend Hakeem Jeffries just said, we're all in the lake together, are we not? Even if it is frozen, we'll skate. We're going to be all in that lake together. Because it's not about 16, it really is about 08. We finally got to the part in the book that I call America, where we were going to start writing the better chapters. The good part. And there are those who have allied together who decided that no, they don't want those chapters to be written. They have decided to put on the page the end and close that book. And they want to write a different book now. They want to write a book based upon manipulation, based upon fear, based upon divisiveness, based upon power and arrogance, and then say that should be the history going forward for the United States of America. And I am here to commit that we will not allow that book to be written. Will we not? Will we allow them to stop the march of justice, which we fight for? And I stand here before you today saying this is my commitment, because this day is Commitment Day for all those on the march of justice. Thank you very much.
coming down to the city and state level, but I want us first. One of the things that National Action Network has started in the last couple of years is addressing fairness in our economic side. In fact, we've questioned where our pension funds are invested. We've questioned where our dollars are invested. Many developers are using our money invested by money managers to gentrify us where we're really paying for our own removal. I go to several of the unions, several municipalities, and ask them who is managing the money. And they say half of them don't even know. And the money managers, mostly all white, lending money to developers who go and move grandma out and it's grandma's pensions that they running the money with. And we've really jumped up and down. Carol Wallace heads that initiative for us on staff. We got her from one of the few public officials that locked arm in arm with us to make it fair. We have Black and Latino and Asian money managers that can give a better return. It's not that we're asking you to give us charity.
That's right.
We know how to invest money and get a bigger return if we give an opportunity. Because we always had to take nothing and make something happen. My mother could take one potato and break 3 meals out of it. So we know how to turn something around if you give it to us. And this has been a partner that the city controller for the city of New York, and he's also a member of NAN. Did you check his membership due down? Scott Stringer.
Thank you. And thank you, Reverend Sharpton, for once again bringing the community together. But I do want to start out and thanking and shouting out the first ever Chief Diversity Officer of New York City, appointed by the City Controller, Carol Wallace. And we said that because of her leadership, we have held the city accountable to the pitiful fact that out of our $19 billion procurement, where we hire lawyers and accountants, we hire food vendors in the greatest city in the world, we have now documented agency by agency how only 5.5% are invested with women and minority-owned businesses. That's because of Kara's work. Give her a round of applause. It's called procurement, but the truth is, it's called discrimination when not used right. And I've always said to Reverend Sharpton, look, I know we can't get a rally of thousands of people saying no procurement, no peace. I understand that. I got that. But we have to change the economics of our city, which begs the question, how do we in secret negotiate an Amazon deal for $3 billion when we're not building affordable housing in our communities? That's what we have to ask. How do we create a situation where there's record homeless, half our children, and we are building affordable housing that's actually unaffordable for 80% of New York? Why is that happening? Dr. King, were alive today, would never, ever have stopped the fight. Now I know today, from Hakeem Jeffries to Yvette Clarke, Grace Meng, and Jerry Nadler, so much of what we worry about is on the national stage. I think about it every day. You think about it too. But while we think globally, we gotta act locally. We gotta demand that the most progressive city in the earth takes care of the most progressive people on earth. The people who moved into communities that nobody wanted to move into. There was no bank investment uptown in Washington Heights where I grew up. There was no economic development. There were
not even any speculators. There were no banks. But people moved in and built communities. They lived in public housing in Mitchell-Lama. They were in reinstate buildings. And today, our founders, our seniors, are the ones being pushed out for the speculators. That we can change. So I'm glad to be here. And I have to tell you that as I was coming here, I remember my son, who was in kindergarten just a year ago, now 7 years old. He came to me and said, "Daddy, I came home from school and I learned about Dr. King." He said it in such a low voice, reverence. I thought he had a voice change. And I said to him, "Max, what did you learn?" And he said, "Daddy, I learned that it doesn't matter what your skin color is. It's we're all equal." I had tears that day. And then a week later, my 5.5-year-old, this is complicated, I know, I can explain. These are my children and my grandchildren, you know that, right? It's okay. Reverend Sharpton, you know, he explains this. But my 5.5-year-old came to me and said, "Daddy, I got hurt this morning," and there was a mark on his face that said, "Who did this?" He said, "Daddy, it was the Invisible Man." I said, "Miles, who's the Invisible Man?" No answer. I said, "You gotta tell me who the Invisible Man is." He looked at me and said, "Daddy, Donald Trump did it." So I leave you tonight talking about the future of our children of all different backgrounds. One of my sons is a scholar, talking about the teachings of Dr. King, and the other one is an anti-Trump organizer for 2020. Thank you all. Happy King Day.
We are working on 2 documentaries. One of the things that one of them asked me was in 1986, we got to be known nationally because of the Howard Beach fight. At the time, the governor was Mario Cuomo. And back in those days, they would have the 3 people that ran Albany go in the room and decide how the budget and how other things was going to happen. Right. Well, one of the things that I have been most overjoyed about, they say in church, is I kept on living. And now we have another Cuomo who's the governor. But for the first time in the history of this state, and certainly in my lifetime, when the 3 go in the room now, for the first time, the white male is the minority in the room. When we marched at Howard Beach, I never thought I'd live to see a black president, and I did and worked with him. And I really never thought I'd see 2/3 of the gang of 3 in Albany be a black woman and a black man. But we can, if we keep voting and organizing, make dreams come true. I want to bring you the majority leader of the New York State Senate, a sister with an A, not an ER. From Westchester County, who doesn't talk loud but can cut you for you know you've been hit. Sister Andrea
Sharpton for bringing us all together and to not only reminding us of why this is so important, but by bringing us all together and having us report to you, our beloved community, from the highest reaches, from our congressional representatives, or state, city, because we understand that the only way that the dream comes through is if we are accountable. We are accountable. And as the Reverend said, I've been here years after year explaining to you the plight of the Democratic majority in the state Senate. We were factionalized. There was a group of people here, a group of people there, and in our division, Republicans kept ruling the House. And then a little thing like voting happened. And a little thing like an awakening of the consciousness after the 2016 election happened, where we realized that we had the power to change everything, and that you can't necessarily just wait till Washington change, although we know Hakeem and Grace and Jerry are working on this. We know we can start changing it right here at home. And from a divided state Senate, we have a united, Democratic-led state Senate. There are 39 people in our Senate majority. One of them you sent me. He's my assistant majority leader, my senior assistant. This is Brian Benjamin. Please give Brian a hand. He's helping me run stuff. And I'm going to take, because I'm so proud of these people, I just want you to know that Robert Jackson is here. You made him a senator. I want you to know that Kevin Parker is here. You made him a senator. I want you to know Jamal Bailey is here. You made him a senator. In fact, you sent 19 people of color to the Senate in the Democrat. You sent 15 new people. You sent 14 women. This is unprecedented. And I kept a good partner in the person of another history maker, our Assembly Speaker, Carl Hayes. So we've been on the job. It'll be a week Wednesday. We are counted. We are counted. Because what I said, you know, and the governor quoted this when he did his State of the Sea, I said, we're in a moment. I don't take this moment for granted. Because we know how hard it was. I know Charlie knows. Hazel knows. Jessica Ramos, another senator. We know what happens when we're given that moment. Especially when people tried so hard to make sure you never got it. It was like why they tried so hard to make sure black folk couldn't vote. Same thing has happened. So the first thing we did was expand the electoral franchise. The first thing we did was bring early voting. The first thing we did was align the power. The first thing we started concentrating, how do we make sure that people understand, as Dr. King said, that voting is the cornerstone of political action. Next thing we did a few things to end discrimination, and tomorrow, we're going to make sure women understand they have the right to choose in New York. We're going to make sure that dreamers dream. We're going to make sure to take from education. We're going to fix the criminal justice system. We are going to create economic advancement, economic parity. We're going to lift up our MWBEs, protect our seniors, fix the housing laws in this great state and in this great city. It's a moment that you all fought for. It's a moment that we almost thought was never going to come. I know my sister Yvette is back there. We were fighting. And then because it's right, because it's just, because the moment is ours for the taking, we've been able to come together in a stronger force than we have ever been. We will make history, not because we're black, not because we're two or three people in the room, but because you sent us there. Not only to make history because we got there, but to make history that shakes the foundation of what this state is about and lifts the foundation of our dream. It's a dream that is yet to be fulfilled. But one thing we know, we ain't going backwards. We only going forward. We only going forward, and we're only going forward together. Thank you so much.
Mr. Speaker, the Speaker of the New York State Assembly, the brother from the Bronx, Brother Carl Hastings.
When my Brooklyn sister, Yvette Clark, was up here talking about Brooklyn, I just want to say, if it wasn't for the Bronx, it was great for Reverend Sharpton and I want to thank Reverend Sharpton for his long-time friendship, and I always like to remind him and publicly thank him that when I did become speaker and the media wanted to try every which way they could to tear me apart, the Reverend said, come home to Nan, and we're going to show them that we know who Carl Hastie is. So Reverend Sharpton, I always want to thank you for that. But it's great also that he mentioned Andrea Stewart Cousins, and I want y'all to understand, and everywhere we've been, I want to remind y'all that is the most powerful woman in the state of New York that we have here. And in a lot of ways, she has even more power than me, because she gets to confirm judges and the governor's appointments and commissioners. But as I said last week, I went to Senator Robert Jackson's swearing in. I'm even happier than she is. Because Daniel O'Donnell and Michael Blake and Latrice Walker and Inez, I don't want to miss anybody, can attest to you there's many times I came upstairs from the second floor, deflated, dejected, because we knew the things that we really wanted to improve this state was blocked by the Republican Senate. I got interviewed last week, and one of the person interviewing me said, well, what's the difference in having a conversation with Andrea there was with John Flanagan? I said, well, the one good thing is I don't have to decide which one of my fingers I'm gonna cut off in order to have to come to an agreement to get something done. So I tell you, I'm the happiest person in the world. I've been praying, I've been jumping up and down. And Rev, since you want us to get a little spiritual here, I'm gonna say this. You know, there's times we always say the Lord will never put more on you than you can handle. But sometimes, Rev, that was being tested when I have to deal with the Republicans in the Senate. So I'm so happy that Andrea's there and all of her new senators that have come in. Because we're going to do some really, really good things. And then she ran some of them off. But I know one of the big things that's really important, because New York City is soon becoming like how San Francisco is. It's becoming the city of the wealthy and the homeless. And we don't want to see New York City happen. So we are going to make sure finally we take care of rent regulations. And I do want to kind of follow just on part of the theme that Reverend Jeffries talked about, and we know he's going to be moving up one day, is when you have a person like Donald Trump in the White House, it makes it even more heartfelt and warm, and that on Wednesday, we're going to pass the DREAM Act so the dreams can be filled with some young people. So all they want to do is just go to college and get an education and do the right thing. So on Dr. King Day, and it's really important, and I'm a first, and Andrew's a first, and I know we got the wonderful Mayor David Dinkins, who's a first. But it's incumbent upon us not to just be the first, but what you're going to do when you are the first. Thank you, and God bless you all.
When I ran for president in 2004, there was one man that went to New Hampshire and headed up the Sharpton for President New Hampshire team. It was about as cold as it is today in New Hampshire. And he is now the Speaker of the New York City Council. And he is a proud former delegate of Sharpton for President. They thought he'd lost his mind in '04. And he has now become the Speaker, and those that laughed at him are trying to tell him they were laughing with him. Let us hear from Speaker Corey Johnson.
Happy King Day! I am so honored to be here today at the House of Justice with my good friend, Reverend Al Sharpton. It is true, when we went to New Hampshire that day, that cold day in January of 2004, literally 15 years ago, it might have been this week, it was cold, and when a guy from Chelsea like me and a guy from Harlem like Reverend Sharpton walked into a bar together, people said, what the hell is going on in New Hampshire? And he has been a friend and someone who I always look to for guidance and for moral clarity. You know, I can't say it better than the congressional delegation and how they spoke today. I can't say it better than our new majority leader, Andrea Stewart-Cousins, and our Speaker of the Assembly, Carl Hastie. But I want to make just one point. And that one point is, on King Day, here at the House of Justice, with the National Action Network, I cannot stand up here today as a white man and give a sermon or preach on race relations. That would be inappropriate. I do not know what it's like to be a person of color in this city or in this country. And the institutional racism and the legacy of oppression, I don't know that. My own story is one of trials and adversity, not analogous to people of color, but still one of discrimination and one of oppression. I grew up in public housing in a small town. My mother had 3 jobs. She cleaned houses on the weekend. I cleaned houses with her. I seroconverted and became HIV positive in October of 2004 when I was 22 years old. I came out when I was 16 years old in my high school. I was the only openly gay student in that high school. And so my goal, my job, my hope is in this position to have sensitivity and compassion and to sometimes move out of the way when I am not the appropriate person to address a certain issue. And I do that today. Today I stand here on King Day recommitting myself to fighting institutional racism, to ensuring that our city is not a city with mass incarceration just 2 miles away on the East River, making sure that children are not getting poisoned from lead paint in public housing, making sure that when we talk about affordable housing, affordable to who? Making sure that if I was smoking a joint on the corner, I would not be arrested in the same way people in this room would be arrested. I don't smoke joints. I'm clean and sober 9.5 years. My biggest accomplishment. July 13, 2009, my last day having a drink and a drug. But it is important for me today to acknowledge the pain, to acknowledge how far we still have to go in this city. We have a great congressional delegation who is bringing the fight to that man whose name I won't say in the White House. But here in this city, with a crumbling subway system, with public housing that is falling apart, with children who are not getting the education they deserve, with mass mass incarceration on the East River, with broken windows policing that are getting young men of color caught up in the criminal justice system. We have to look in the mirror at home on King Day. And so it is my hope that I stand in solidarity with all of you as an openly gay man, someone who stands on the shoulders of Bayard Rustin, the organizer who organized that March on Washington for Dr. King, who was a gay man who was persecuted in the 1960s. I stand on his shoulder, and I stand on the shoulders of those icons and leaders who came before me and came before all of us to make this possible for Carl Hastie, and make this possible for Andrea Stewart Cousins, and make this possible for me. I came here at 19 years old with 2 bags, knowing one person. This city has been a city of dreams and aspirations for many. But those dreams and aspirations are getting out of reach because of the affordability crisis plaguing our city. And so I look forward to working with my friend Reverend Sharpton and the leaders in this stage and my colleagues in government to ensure that we have a just and equal city. And there are 4 members of the City Council here today I want to acknowledge. We have Councilmember Brad Lander from Brooklyn. We have Councilmember Vanessa Gibson from the Bronx. We have Councilmember and man supporter and member Jamani Williams. And we have Councilmember Carlina Rivera. We look forward to continuing the fight in the House of Justice and on the streets for justice with all of you. Happy King Day. Thank you very much. Helen Rosenthal is here as well.
And one of the reasons why it is so important that Corey's there is that we really want to see diversity. And he as a openly white gay male, as I said, a black woman over the Senate, a black man Speaker of the House, a white male as governor, all shows diversity. We're not anti anyone, but we have been shut out from diversity so long that I never thought I would live to see it, but we are if we keep voting. And I think that's important. Let us bring, while I'm in the Bronx, one of the great activists, elected activists, who has been with us from as long as I can remember. He helped way back from Diallo on and has never missed a battle. The borough president of the Bronx, borough president Ruben Gill.
No justice! No justice! No justice! I bring you greetings from the Boogie Down Bronx. Rev, I remember first time repeating those chants was back in 1999 with Amadou Diallo. And I come back each and every single time to thank you, Reverend Sharpton, and the good folks from National Action Network for being with us in the Bronx and helping us in the city heal. I also thank you, Reverend Sharpton, as I come as a Latino or Puerto Rican who saw the National Action Network and saw firsthand Al Sharpton go to federal prison fighting for the injustice that was done in Vieques, Puerto Rico. I come to you today to add to my voice about how happy and proud I am that we've all come together during this King Day. Much has been said already, and I know that there are so many other speakers that are waiting to speak. But very quickly, I am not going to give a sermon. I know that so many people have already quoted the Bible. I'm not a PK, I'm just the son of one. But
My brother Hakeem Jeffries, who's a great speaker. That one over here. A great speaker. He talked about turbulence and how we all find God in the moments of turbulence. Ladies and gentlemen, it is not enough to have folks come before us and